This week on The Other Side, the COVID report is out, and guess what? It holds nobody to account, and it takes us all for mugs. They want us to understand how difficult it all was for them at the time, and that they didn't mean to grossly abuse their authority. Meanwhile, they're abusing their authority again, this time by banning a tour by an American political speaker that's already sold thousands of tickets because you're not allowed to make up your own minds about what you want to hear and see. Australia gets a Conservative mainland premier again as the Liberal National Party win the Queensland state election, but whether they're actually prepared to stand up for classical Liberal and Conservative values remains to be seen. And the US election is just days away. We'll take a look at the last moves of desperation by the Democrats and Kamala Harris to stop the surging Trump momentum. This is The Other Side. G'day Sydney, g'day Perth, g'day Australia. This is episode 334 of The Other Side for the weekend commencing Friday, November the 1st, 2024. I'm Damien Curry. The Other Side is your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary to get you smart for the weekend and the week ahead without the woke. A new show drops every Friday night on YouTube. And our bias, we always declare it right up front. Our perspective on the news is centre right, what you might call good old-fashioned, everyday, common sense Aussie values. And most importantly, we pay our own way with your voluntary support. Now, a very important thing to note about this show is there is absolutely no way you could possibly agree with everything that I say or everything that our guests say, and that is totally okay. Unlike, a certain other media outlet that thinks that all the deep thinking people in Australia exist on the left of politics and in our universities. We know there are wise people all across this land, and we bust the assumption, the modern Australian assumption, that tall poppies all need to be cut down to size. They don't. They lift us all up. And that's what this show is all about, promoting classical liberal, good old-fashioned Aussie values. Let's go. I would really love to be able to start the show for just 1 week without having something that just absolutely makes my blood boil about our appalling standard of government in this country. And by government, I don't only mean the Albanese government, I mean all the politicians and all the bureaucrats, especially the senior bureaucrats, those invisible people at the upper ranks of our government departments in Canberra who really run our country. But this week, they've really gone over the top again on two fronts, treating us like absolute children by denying a visa to a popular Conservative speaker simply because she says some weird stuff sometimes. Something that I don't believe they or any moral, have any moral or ethical authority to do. Even if they have written themselves laws to make it all legal, it's still immoral and unethical and goes beyond what they should be doing as bureaucrats. More on that later. But worst of all this week, the disgusting, slimy, manipulative nature of this latest COVID inquiry report and the gross hypocrisy that accompanied it from the Treasurer Jim Chalmers really took the cake. The COVID inquiry was established in September last year to consider the federal government's responses to the pandemic. What we really need is an independent royal commission which looks into the totality of the response from all levels of government and all the arms of the bureaucracy, especially the state governments. But we can't have that. This watered-down little investigation is all we're going to get for now. It was led by an independent panel of people that the government says has significant experience in public health and economic policy. Here's the federal health minister, Albo's health minister, Mark Butler, in his press conference with the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, to release the report as covered by the ABC this week.
It is very human after an event like that to want to move on and to avoid raking over what was an enormously distressing period for our community. But we have a responsibility, particularly as a government, we have a responsibility to examine our response to the pandemic, to learn what we did well, and in particular to learn what we could have done better. And importantly, to build, as this report describes it, a high-level playbook for the next pandemic, because we know there will be a next pandemic.
Yeah, let's not have a next pandemic too soon. Thanks, guys. As for us just wanting to move on, are you nuts? Most of us want a royal commission. We want people held accountable. We don't want to move on. We want answers. We want accountability, and we want punishment. We want laws in place to stop the gross overreach by state and federal governments that we saw from ever happening again. It tore families apart. It left Aussies abandoned overseas, unable to return to their own country. Let that sink in. I don't care if you have to build a quarantine centre, maybe not too big a one, but a quarantine place in the middle of the desert. I couldn't care less. You've got to allow Australians to come back to their own country if they want to. It saw protesters shot at. It saw pregnant women arrested by lunatic police in front of their kids. Generations old family businesses were destroyed. It wrecked families, it wrecked marriages, it ruined our kids' development and education, and it caused economic mayhem leading to the inflation that we are all suffering today. And I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about the way they managed COVID. And all that is without even mentioning the obscene abuse of emergency powers, including forcing people to take a vaccine that was new and largely untested against their will, under threat of loss of livelihood or their freedom of movement. And I'm pro-vax, okay? But you don't force people to take new medicine. Force them. It's obscene. So no, thank you. We do not want to move on. We want a royal commission, we want justice, and we want punishment for those who abuse their power knowingly, deliberately, and despite every advice from experts in real time, in the moment, telling them that they were out of control, which they arrogantly and irresponsibly completely ignored. We don't want a wimpy report like this designed to sweep it all under the carpet.
It doesn't seek to scapegoat people who were seeking to act in the best interests of our country and the community. But be very clear, it's a report that does not pull its punches. And I'm conscious, and I know the Treasurer is conscious, that it is easy with the benefit of hindsight to second-guess decisions or criticise decisions that were made in the heat of the fight against a once-in-a-century pandemic. And we're very conscious not to do that.
Oh, the heat of the fire against a once-in-a-century pandemic that everybody knew was going to come eventually and we had crisis manuals for, but you ignored. No. You don't get away with it that easily, mate. Back right up there. These decisions weren't the innocent, sweet mistakes of kind, well-meaning premiers and chief health officers battling in the heat of the crisis, doing their very best under tough circumstances, not getting the advice they needed. They had the advice they needed. Everybody who works in crisis management knows that you do not abdicate your authority and hand over all decision-making to just one of your senior people, like almost all the premiers did with their pathetic, well, that's up to the chief health officer and I'm listening to the chief health officer. That was a complete abdication of responsibility and dereliction of duty. As the Premier, as the Prime Minister, and he was just as bad, as a leader in a crisis, you have the responsibility to take counsel and advice from a wide range of experts on what the impacts of the decisions that you're going to make are going to be. You're required as the leader then to make those decisions and most of all, to own them. And what we saw, especially from Premiers Andrews, McGowan and Palaszczuk, was a complete abandonment of the people and that responsibility that they were elected to government to hold. Time and time again, they were warned about the economic impacts. They were warned about the health impacts and the psychological impacts and the impacts on our kids. They were warned about the abuse of their powers and the denial of human rights and fundamental freedoms of movement. And they did it all anyway, without any humility, without any respect for our freedoms and democracy, or any consideration for their recklessness, and all while putting political and PR considerations before good leadership in the moment. And that is inexcusable, and it does need to be highlighted. The report says that measures enacted under the Biosecurity Act were restrictive and their broader economic, social and mental health and human rights impacts were not always understood or considered. Wow. We told you that at the time and you ignored us. All of the independent media in Australia were saying the same thing, and some of the mainstream media even were saying it. This press conference, this charade by the Health Minister and the Treasurer was truly sickening. The politicians went on to congratulate themselves First, for the inquiry itself and how great it is and how great the report is, it isn't. And then for the good performance as a country on COVID, it wasn't.
This is an enormously valuable report from Robin and Angela and Catherine. And again, I want to thank them for the work that they did. I want to thank the Secretariat from PM&C that worked so closely with them. Hand over to you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark, for all of the work that Mark's put into this. He briefed the Cabinet yesterday and we're releasing it today really as soon as we could after Mark was able to take the Cabinet through all of the details. This is a really comprehensive and it's a really considered piece of work.
Oh, it's a piece of work, all right. Aren't we just great? And Mark briefed Cabinet on what was in it, and we're doing this press conference now. Wow. And look at this big, thick document. I bet there's a lot of words inside. Wouldn't you just love to have someone tell you how great you are every day just for doing the bare minimum expected in your job? And when they're handing down a report into how you failed in your job? I guess that's why they get the big bucks. Anyway, it gets better. Of course, the answer government always gives to a failure of government is more government. So Albo's health minister has pledged more of your money, $250 million this time, to establish a permanent Centre for Disease Control. Oh, that's original. Tasked with ensuring that Australia is prepared for the next pandemic. Why? Well, because Australians aren't going to listen to governments again if they try to pull the tricks they did in 2020 to 22. The report says that we are unlikely to accept many of the sweeping restrictions like lockdowns again. No kidding, Sherlock. You try that garbage again with a Dan Andrews Mark II type premier, and there'll be riots in the streets this time. The new Aussie CDC will start on January 1, 2026, and it'll be based in Canberra, of course. And what other failed health bureaucracy would you be getting rid of to pay for this new one that you're creating? What jobs will you make redundant to pay for the new jobs that you're creating? None. Nothing. What a surprise. The opposition has not committed to supporting this yet, saying it will look at the details first. Wise move. And get this, the first job of this new CDC would be to establish a surveillance system.
The first priority of the CDC will be to establish a comprehensive joined up data and surveillance system.
Cool, more surveillance, just what we need. Now, the Treasurer decided to use the press conference as a chance to attack ScoMo and his predecessor Josh Frydenberg for spending too much during the pandemic on measures like JobKeeper. He's absolutely right. It was ridiculous, and we're still paying for it today through inflation. But the hypocrisy was just too much to bear. Goofy Dr. Jim was calling for more spending at the time, not less spending, as Sky News presenter Andrew Bolt explained on his show this week.
Here is Chalmers, who's then in the opposition, near the end of the pandemic, demanding the government drop its plans to wind back the expensive JobKeeper spending.
We urge him to reconsider winding that back because the economy is still in all sorts of trouble.
And that wasn't all. Labor wanted to pay people to get vaccinated. That would have cost another $6 billion. All these other schemes that all up would have meant that Labor spent $81 billion more than even the Morrison government.
Andrew Bolt highlighting the gobsmacking hypocrisy of our political class on the Bolt Report this week. Here at the other side, we do not get more than $1 billion of taxpayer money like the ABC does to waste on fun stuff that we and our friends like while ignoring the public that we're supposed to serve. We have to rely on your support of this show. But I also hate asking for charity. So we've done a deal with what I think is the best VPN service in the world so that you can support this show and get excellent value for yourself in return. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route all your data through a different server location so that you can't be tracked by the prying eyes of big government and big corporations. It keeps you and your family truly safe, and it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN, is quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that's pretty much it. You can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. Unbelievable. That is a whopping 83% off the normal price. And you'll get the first 4 months free, and you will be helping our show a lot. So get onto it. piavpn.com/otherside to get the special deal. And get this, if you've got a Netflix account, by signing on through a server in another country to Netflix, like the US, for example, you'll get access to that country's library of Netflix shows on your account as if you were in that country, which is also great if you want Netflix in a different language or something. piavpn.com/otherside. US presidential elections are notoriously difficult to predict. I went to bed in 2020 on election day believing Trump had it firmly in the bag, and that was after the counting, and woke up the next morning to find he'd lost. But if the insanity of the Democrats' campaign being dialed up to 11 this week is anything to go by, then things must be looking pretty bad for Kamala. The latest madness from the loonies in blue was this: a meme that transcended social media and made its way firmly into the old media too. The meme implied that the Trump rally at New York's Madison Square Garden was like a pre-World War II Nazi rally at the same venue. I've resisted calling Trump and MAGA fascist, mainly because I've understood fascism and Nazism as almost incomprehensibly evil, the tweeter writes. But the reality is MAGA today is who the Nazis were before they seized power. There's no better historical comparison to MAGA than the Nazi of the early 1930s, tweeted Alexander Vindman. Now, if that name, Alexander Vindman, sounds a little familiar, it's because he's the guy who the Democrats used to testify against Trump in the ridiculous impeachment lawfare over that phone call with the Ukrainian president. Remember that one, the quid pro quo thing? Never mind the pretty obvious corruption of the Bidens in Ukraine. Trump made a phone call and asked the president of Ukraine to investigate the Bidens' alleged corruption to actually find out why Hunter Biden was earning $1 million a year from a major Ukrainian gas company when he doesn't know anything about gas or energy. But that's not allowed. That might expose the Democrats' corruption. So impeach Trump. And they did. Anyway, Vindman is still exaggerating stuff for political deception, it seems. Only now, smart people are seeing straight through the nonsense. The meme shows this image from a rally of American Nazis in New York before World War II at the iconic venue, Madison Square Garden. And then this image beside it from Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden this week. Now, if you have an IQ under 50, you'd immediately draw the conclusion that these are the same thing. But if you've got an IQ over 50, you'd see it for what it is: complete and utter nonsense, and a pathetic and desperate scare tactic by the Democrats. I mean, clearly it's identical, right? Take a look again. See the similarity between this image and a Nazi rally? So clear, isn't it? Of course, if you're a regular viewer of The Other Side, you're smart, so you can't see the similarity. But I bet your lefty friends can see the similarity with this one. In fact, you should show them this clip from our show and ask them if they can see the similarity between this image and this one. Because you can then laugh at them loudly when they say yes. Because the image I showed you that time was a Foo Fighters concert at Madison Square Garden from 2021. This is the picture of the Trump rally this week. Clearly, it looks much more like this Nazi rally shot. I mean, seriously, folks, the Democrats have lost their minds, as have the old media in the US too.
Can you just give us your reaction to what you heard last night, just hours and hours of frankly, hate, and what, frankly, how it could electrify this electorate?
Well, there's a couple of things. As you mentioned, this was a hate rally. Mm-hmm. This was not just a presidential rally. This was also not just a campaign rally. I think it's very important for people to understand that these are mini January 6 rallies. These are mini Stop the Steal rallies. These are rallies to prime an electorate into rejecting the results of an election if it doesn't go the way that they want.
Now that is the kookiest conspiracy theory garbage I have ever heard. No, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, you intellectual giant. They're just election rallies, that's all. Sorry, nice try. We're not that stupid, and we're not buying your attempt to drum up any more hate.
They are trying to prime the kind of froth that led up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And so it's very important that we connect those dots.
Oh, yes, we have to connect the dots. There is actually a conspiracy to destroy democracy and the institutions of America and turn the country into a one-party state. And it's coming from her side of politics, folks. We've covered extensively on this show in the past the Lawfare attacks on Donald Trump, why the finding of assault in that civil case was not a criminal finding, even of assault, let alone rape. We showed you how unusual the woman who brought those charges was and how much money she got awarded in damages. We also showed you how the porn star, Stormy Daniels, who claims she had sex with Trump, even said on national TV originally that the sex was completely consensual and she was not a victim and she didn't want to be painted as one. That's if it happened at all. I mean, she's hardly credible. We showed you how the 34 felonies, 34 felonies that Trump was found guilty of in a very biased court, in a very biased state, were actually all related to only one offence, not 34. It was 11 checks, 11 invoices, and 12 ledger entries, total 34, all relating to just one payment for one thing that isn't illegal, hush money for Stormy Daniels. And that proves nothing, because you can pay someone hush money just to shut up and go away if they're trying to blackmail you with lies. So I'm not going to revisit all those stories. You can go back and watch them if you like. It's all there on our channel. If you don't believe now that there was a campaign of lawfare against Trump, and you don't believe that the Democrats have abused and manipulated the US justice system for political gain worse than anyone in history, then nothing will convince you. You're watching The Other Side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. And as 2024 draws to a close, this is our fifth last show for the year, would you believe? We are planning for 2025, and we do want to keep being able to do what we're doing and do more of it. But we do need your help. We rely on the voluntary support of our viewers. We get no government funding, and advertisers are hard to come by on the non-woke side of media for some strange reason, probably because of the terrible state of corporates in Australia. There's plenty of opportunity here for advertisers, but we need your direct support, our viewers too. Despite having around 100,000 wonderful viewers every week, at the moment we have fewer than 100 regular donors. And I've got to be honest, that isn't enough by a long stretch to pay the bills. We've just launched our new website and a new way for you to support the show and help us keep doing what we're doing, and maybe even more of it in the future. And we only ask you to do so if you can afford it and if you do truly feel that you're getting some value out of the show. So just go to othersidetv.com.au. It's a bit different to our handle on Twitter. It's othersidetv.com.au, and sign up for free, or sign up to the exclusive side, and you can support us for as little as $4.50 a month. That's less than the price of a magazine or even most newspapers. We really do need your support to keep us going and growing. That's othersidetv.com.au, and even if you can't afford to support us financially, please do just go on and sign up for free, as we can then still keep in touch if those misinformation and e-safety police come after us. It's othersidetv.com.au, our new website. Check it out. US media commentator and constitutional legal expert Mark Levin was appalled by the last-ditch, desperate and pathetic attempt to link Donald Trump's supporters with Nazis because of that rally at Madison Square Garden, as he explained on his Fox News show Life, Liberty and Levin this week.
The Democrat Party is obsessed with Adolf Hitler, but it's too bad. They're talking about 1939, where the neo-Nazis met at Madison Square Garden. Last time I checked, the Knicks played there and so forth, but that's all right. But they're not upset about 2024, where the neo-Nazis populate the Democrat Party and populate the organizations that support the Democrat Party and populate some of the supporters and voters of Kamala Harris. You know, the River to the Sea crowd, the neo-Nazis, you know, Tlaib, Omar, and their ilk. I haven't heard Hillary Clinton announce them. I haven't heard anybody in their party announce them, including, of course, Kamala Harris.
But like me, educated in Australia, you've probably always believed that the Democrats were the kind and nice people party and the Republicans were the nasty racist people party. But it was the Democrats who first brought us the first grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest. Segregation was supported heavily by the Democrats in the South. The civil rights movement in the 60s nearly came unstuck because of the Southern Democrats. The Jim Crow laws and even the American Civil War. The President of the Confederacy and most of the leadership were Democrats. And the late 19th century brought us Woodrow Wilson, the 28th US President, a Democrat.
Wilson was an accomplished racist activist. In his academic work on American history, Wilson was friendly to the Ku Klux Klan's mission of suppressing blacks, and he was forgiving of its terror tactics, explains Williamson M. Evers in Education Weekly. When he was the president of Princeton, Wilson expressed his pride that no African-American students had been admitted during his tenure. As governor in 1911, Wilson signed into law a eugenics bill titled An Act to Authorize and Provide for the Sterilization of Feeble-Minded, including idiots, imbeciles, and morons, epileptics, rapists, certain criminal and other defectives.
Democrat President Woodrow Wilson. What a guy. Fox News' Mark Levin there. So I hardly think Donald Trump is a threat to democracy or a new breed of Nazi.
And for Hillary Clinton to get in there and talk about 1939, the neo-Nazis, it's her party today that's filled with Jew-hating neo-Nazis. It's Donald Trump and the Republican Party and the MAGA movement that defends the state of Israel, that is appalled by the Democrat voters in the streets chasing Jews at universities and elsewhere. And I want to explain this to you. Kamala Harris publicly agrees with protesters accusing Israel of genocide. What he's talking about, it's real. Meet Kamala's incredible team of anti-Semitic Islamists, and there's a hell of a lot of them. Meet Kamala's Palestinian best friend who changed her mind on Israel, another bigot. Kamala Harris is surrounded with these people, neo-Nazis.
Mark Levin on Fox News. And remember, when they liken Trump's rallies to Nazi rallies, it's not Trump they're attacking. It's you if you support him. They're again calling half of America racist deplorables. They've learned nothing from 2016 and will need the lesson to be delivered again. But unlike with Kamala Harris, who can't do a softball 5-minute TV interview without taking a few days off to rehearse all her carefully yet badly crafted messages, you can actually make up your own mind about Trump's intelligence, his policies, his general view of the world, and his approach to management and governance and foreign policy, without the Democrats' lies and spin and reputation destruction. Reputation destruction is a very common tactic of the left, by the way. It's what childish and low IQ people do when they run out of logical and rational arguments. They attack the person. They go ad hominem, as they say in Latin. But you can judge Trump for yourself. Because apart from the bucket loads of media appearances and rallies he does, he sat down for a 3-hour conversation, 3 hours, with top American podcaster Joe Rogan this week. Could you imagine Joe Biden or Kamala Harris doing that?
I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. Being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean, you haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts, and they've brushed those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right.
Look, I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that make it, that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstance. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target, and it's a very dangerous business.
That's Donald Trump speaking about the attempts to murder him in the lead up to this election that the media seem to have forgotten about. Rogan discussed the interview on his show later in the week.
And when you see over and over and over and over again the media manipulating things and lying about things to make him seem way worse than he
Call
is,
him Hitler?
You should be suspicious.
Yes. You don't know him well, right?
I don't know him at all.
But
I
after sitting
literally
down for
never
3 hours.
had a conversation with him other than "nice to meet you, sir." And he complimented me. I said, "Thank you. You're really good at this UFC stuff." And he's got this ability to just keep going. This is what's crazy. Like, the podcast is 3 hours long. The guy didn't pee before the podcast. He didn't pee after the podcast. I don't know him other than the 3 hours that I talked to him when he was trying to be at his best.
And
right?
Kamala Harris has not said yes yet.
She hasn't said no either. People keep saying she said no. I said I would have a conversation with her like a human being. That's all I want to do.
Good luck with that. Kamala Harris's campaign team are having none of it. Despite the fact that Harris desperately needs to lift her vote with men of all ages and races, they know that she couldn't handle it.
What she said was, according to Rogan, she won't fly to Austin, Texas, where his show is based, and she won't sit for 3 hours, which is what he does with his guests. She said, "You come to me and I'll give you one." How obnoxious is she? First of all, is there a person on earth who thinks Kamala Harris can handle a 3-hour interview with Joe Rogan? I mean, she knows she can't. Her team knows she can't. And so they said, okay, maybe just an hour to try to make it a deal breaker so that he would be the one to say no. And they said, you have to come to us, which, again, they're setting these impossible conditions so that he'll say no.
That's Megyn Kelly on her podcast this week. There is no way that Kamala Harris could or would do the Joe Rogan show. Imagine what she'll be like if there's a major international crisis that has to be managed. I'm sick of being told, oh, you don't like her because she's a woman. No, I don't like her because she's not capable. She has no track record on anything, even though she's been vice president for 4 years. And she wasn't selected by her party membership through the usual vetting process for this candidacy for the president. And she's fake. I'd vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I support many strong, capable female politicians, thanks. Jacinta Price, Maggie Thatcher, Georgia Maloney, Kristi Noem, Bronwyn Bishop, but not this woman. I don't agree with all of Trump's policies, but at least we know who he is and what he stands for and the driving principles behind him. But you can't vote for somebody if you don't know what they stand for. You aren't going to buy a product if you don't know what's inside the packet. Frankly, I think Rogan should stop asking Kamala Harris to come on. There's very little to gain for him. She needs him much more than he needs her. The Trump interview had 40 million views by the middle of the week. And on Thursday, our time, Trump's vice presidential running mate, J.D. Vance, also did Joe Rogan's show, and that is online now to watch also. If you have a Netflix or other streaming media account from a global company and you're on holidays and log in from another country, you may have noticed that shows that are available in those other countries are different. That's because different media companies have different deals with different streaming services in different countries. Imagine being able to log into Netflix, though, as if you were in America, or maybe a country that speaks a language other than English that you speak, to access more shows, but you can do it all without leaving your couch here in Australia. Well, there is a way. There is a way. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route your data through a different server location. Not only can you access more content, but a VPN keeps you safe and secure and your family safe so that you can't be tracked by prying eyes of big government and big corporations. And it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some other VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN. It's quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that is pretty much it. And the great news is if you sign up for PIA VPN, you are also helping the other side. Heaps, and getting great value for money as well. And you can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. That's a whopping 83% off the normal price, and you'll get the first 4 months free. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside right now to get our special deal. That's piavpn.com/otherside. I said earlier that there were two things that the government did this week that showed profound arrogance and revealed just how over-governed and unfree Australia has become since the turn of the century. The first was the appalling COVID report that seeks to let bad leaders who behave with gobsmacking arrogance and wrecked people's lives off the hook with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. The second is this story: the banning of Candace Owens from our shores by our nanny state overlords. The banning of a speaker whose tour has already sold thousands of tickets, that thousands of Aussies have decided they do want to see. But you can't children, on the dubious claim that she might cause some kind of national discord if she's allowed to tour here.
The headline, this is from news.com, Tony Burke blocks visa for far-right U.S. influencer Candace Owens. He is the immigration minister, by the way, over in Australia. And I also want to make it clear to you guys that I found out at the same time that the press found out. So his office chose to leak this. This is supposed to be a private application process. So unless I spoke about this, no one should have known about this. But they chose to leak this, which I think is absolutely stunning. But listen, like I've been kind of stunned throughout this entire process, obviously, because Tony Burke, before we had even applied for a visa, said that if she applies, we're going to reject it. And I just am very interested in the process, I guess, just what goes on in this country, which is supposed to be, supposed to be a free country, I assume. But I guess the immigration minister can unilaterally make these sorts of decisions.
Candace Owens is an American mother of three. She's been a prominent conservative commentator for years now, with tens of millions of fans around the world. She speaks on a wide range of topics and for hours a week on her online show. Chances are she's gonna upset some people some of the time. That's what shows like this do. That's what free speech is all about. Chances are she's gonna occasionally take the wrong track on something. That's what shows like this do. I'm not gonna get into what she said or what they said she said, because what matters in this particular case is not whether we agree with what she said or even if we find some of it utterly appalling. What matters is that our government is deciding that you don't even get to make your own mind up about that. That the core principles of free speech in our country are being ripped from us more and more every single day. And not enough of us are completely outraged by it. Without free speech, we have no freedom. It is the most fundamental freedom. The right to speak and discuss and debate bad ideas so we can learn, grow, and get rid of them. And the complete rejection that any government has any right to tell you what you can or cannot say, or worse, what you must or must not say. So it leads me to this, folks. Who the hell do Anthony Albanese and this clown, Tony Burke, and the entire bureaucracy in Canberra and the E-Safety Commission and all these creepy little people that want to tell you how to live your life and treat you like children, who the hell do they think they are?
Listen, I want to be careful here because I actually don't want to stoop to his level. I want to kind of take the approach of speaking about what's actually going on here, because it's quite serious. It is quite serious when you have a person who says that the reason that I am not allowed to travel to Australia, never been in trouble in my entire life. I have traveled to, I was literally in Tokyo 2 weeks ago. I've traveled all over the world. Literally just all over the world, from China to Tokyo to everywhere, Hungary to Croatia to Italy to France. You name it, down to South America. I've been there and I've just never been in trouble. And yet the reason that he gave to the public was because I had the capacity to incite discord in almost every direction. The quotation he gave back in November was, from downplaying the impact of the Holocaust with comments about Mengele through to claims that Muslims started slavery, Candace Owens has the capacity to incite discord in almost every direction. Okay. So of course that's just not true. And one of the things that's really remarkable is when you see people writing these articles about things that I allegedly said, they all keep saying the ADL says she said this. So they're talking about a Zionist organizations that says that she said this. I guess none of them can fact check that themselves. They just want to give an excuse to the public that this was somehow done legitimately. And of course, there is not a single, they cannot produce a clip of me talking about Joseph Mengele because it doesn't exist. They literally cannot produce a clip of that. I have no idea how it is that you are alleging that I am like both anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic. Again, all of this is to just make a statement to try to present me as some very scary person akin to Adolf Hitler.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting not because they're not banning Candace Owens. They're banning you. They're banning me. They're banning us from choosing whether we want to see Candace Owens or not. The ban's on us. There's one reason and one reason only that they're banning her from entering Australia. They are on the political left and she is on the political right. That is it. It's a gross abuse of power and it is political censorship. And we cannot let this happen. And if you are on the political left, you need to put your politics aside on this one and be as outraged as people on the right are, because it can easily be you next. Candace has gone down rabbit holes that I totally disagree with. I've looked at a lot of stuff too, and I've concluded that the Jewish people are not one big identity politics group who all think the same way. That in its original and most basic form, Zionism was an open and upfront political movement to get the Jews back to their homeland and was totally valid, not some dark hidden conspiracy theory. And I totally disagree with her on the Israel-Palestine war in Gaza. But I have friends who disagree with me. Many of you who watch this show disagree with me on Israel. I get it all the time. That's supposed to be allowed. We have a beer, we talk, we disagree, we stay friends. That's how a healthy, normal country behaves. But why is it always the left that wants to shut down discussion and cut off friendships? Always the left. They call the right deplorables. They assume we're dumb. They call us Nazis when we go to a normal political rally in Madison Square Garden or march in the streets of Melbourne against draconian abuse of power during COVID. There's been an inquiry. It wasn't a draconian abuse of power. We could say that now. And then they ask, why is our world so polarized nowadays? Ooh, there's so much polarization, particularly in evil America. Evil America? Really? It's because you guys won't talk about anything. That's why. The left just want to shut everything down and rule with an iron fist, which says a lot, in my view, about the quality of their arguments. You can always tell how good someone's argument is by how fast they run to an ad hominem attack, personal attack, playing the man and not the ball, the weak, pathetic strategy of reputation destruction.
I always talk about the Hitler hoax. When you get to the point where people start saying or trying to make you believe that there is someone out there that supports Adolf Hitler, like they got on a stage and they got up and they were like, Joseph Mengele is great and Hitler's great, you know that you are dealing with someone who is intentionally lying. And a perfect example of that was when I debated Rabbi Shmuley and he recycled the Hitler talking point, which the ADL has recycled for years, saying that I once got up on a stage and I supported Adolf Hitler. And Piers Morgan slapped it down in one of the most beautiful manners that I've ever seen live on TV. Take a listen. I want to jog your memory on that.
And when she said in 2018 that she has no issue with Hitler because he was a nationalist, but then he wanted to go beyond her borders. Even then, we didn't call her an anti-Semite. That's an absurd thing to say, that you had no issue with Hitler. Hitler, even domestically by then, had enacted all the Nuremberg laws. There was already the November 9th, 1938 pogrom.
Hang on.
And she
said, just to clarify, let's take these one at a time. What do you believe she said about Adolf Hitler in the clip you're talking about?
She said that there was no issue with Hitler except for the fact that he went beyond his borders. If he was a nationalist, that would have been enough.
Let me play the clip.
His domestic. No, but my point is, no one called her. My
in
point
the
is,
interest of fairness, I'm going to play the clip so that viewers who've never heard it can hear what actually got said.
Yeah, I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that it gets the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, in at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism. In thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. I think that it's okay. It's important to retain your country's identity and to make sure that what's happening here, which I think is incredibly worrisome in terms of the decrease in the birth rate that we're seeing in the UK, is what you kind of want to avoid. So I don't have I have no problems with nationalism. It's globalism that I try to avoid.
So, Candace, on that specific point, would you say that Rabbi Shmuley has categorized it correctly or not?
He's just openly lying, and that's why he didn't want you to play the clip. I was in the UK, by the way. I was at the Royal Mobile Club. There were Jewish journalists in the room, and nothing was written about it until months later when somebody was working on a hit piece about me.
A hit piece. A hit piece. You know, we've become too comfortable with that word. We're too comfortable with a world in which so-called journalists at places like The Guardian or Four Corners do hit pieces about people. Hit pieces should not be normalised. They're not okay. Hit pieces are distorted propaganda pretending to be journalism designed to do one thing: reputation destruction. And reputation destruction is violence. If you think bullying is a bad thing, as a lot of our friends on the left do, if bullying is like assault, then reputation destruction is murder. So hit pieces are like reputational attempted murder, and we should never be okay with that.
I didn't even mention Jewish people. I didn't mention the Holocaust. And suddenly you have people like Rabbi Shmuley who are pretending that I got up there and I defended Adolf Hitler. It's really important to see how these lies are formed in the media. And I know, and I trust my audience, they know better than to think that I would ever be on a platform like saying Joseph Mengele or Hitler was great. And if I truly did say that, then you would probably rest assured that if I showed up into Australia, people wouldn't be attending my shows. They wouldn't be attending my shows. People would actually be legitimately outraged because the majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people, would never go out and truly support someone who says, yes, Adolf Hitler was just an amazing person.
Well, you'd think so. You'd think Australia was a free country if you're an American. You'd think we let our adult citizens make up their own mind about stuff. But sadly, you'd be wrong. What Australia has become in the past couple of decades is absolutely unrecognisable from the Australia I grew up in and that I left when I moved overseas in 2001. Australia is now a nanny state, run by people who think they have some right to rule over the people when they're supposed to be serving the people. Most of them, the people, it seems, are happy to let them do it. So here we are. Big Brother Canberra is at it again, meddling in your freedom to make up your own mind and go here, Candace, for yourself. Never mind the cost to the Australian promoters of this tour, who I think should sue the government for millions in my view. Never mind your right to judge for yourself. There's just one final thing. There's a lot more that Candace goes into in her video this week about what's happening in Gaza that I don't have time to bring you here. And I don't want to confuse the issues. Candace's position on this war is not the point here. The point is she's not a threat to anyone or anything, and our pathetic government is banning her entering what used to be my free country. And that makes me more angry than anything else I've probably ever spoken about on this show. But I urge you to watch Candace's full video. It's on YouTube. It's called Oops, I Got Fired from Australia. Because she says a lot about why she feels the way she does now about how Israel has prosecuted this war. I still disagree with her. War is horrendous, children suffer, but the answer can't always be that nobody gets hurt today, because we also have to consider the children on the other side. But she's coming from a good place. She's a good person, and she's definitely no threat to anyone. I'm grossly ashamed of my country right now, and we are being rightly embarrassed, shamed, and condemned on the world stage for how we've allowed our leaders to take us deep, deep, deep into being a nanny state. We are a laughingstock among free thinkers around the world, and sadly, we deserve every bit of it. Now, you might have noticed in that clip, we're very excited about that one because we had a clip within a clip, within a clip, within a clip, within the show, which is the first time we've ever done that. 3 levels deep. It's like that movie. What's it called, Aaron? Inception. You're watching The Other Side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke, and we need your support to help us keep doing what we're doing and maybe even more of it in the future. Just go to othersidetv.com.au and sign up for free, or sign up to the exclusive side and support us for as little as $4.50 a month. That's not even the price of a small coffee these days. We really do need your support to keep us growing and keep us going, because as you know, we don't get the $1.2 billion of money stolen from taxpayers against their will every year to play with like our Too Cool for School friends over at their ABC. So help us out, othersidetv.com.au, and even if you can't afford to support us financially, please do sign up for free, because at least then we can still keep in touch if the misinformation and e-safety police come after us. Othersidetv.com.au, our new website. Check it out. And joining us now, as she does every week, Alexandra Marshall from Spectator Online, the editor for Flat White. Alexandra, welcome. And I noticed that you have your wonderful Halloween earrings on for us today.
Well, of course, Damien, I'm a vampire. It is Halloween. I'm going to wear the earrings whether you like it or not. But also, we had a story this morning about China and their Great Wall of Fire, which is their firewall. They're cracking down on Halloween because apparently people were dressing up as Donald Trump with little ear patches. They were dressing up as Batman. They were dressing up as Iron Man. And they were poking fun at the CCP. So now Halloween is basically banned in China.
Well, you know, your government's strong and your ideology is strong when it can withstand... Oh, it can't withstand Halloween. Oh, it's not that strong. What a surprise. Getting to more serious news, though, we have had a bit of a COVID inquiry. It's gone by very quietly in most of the mainstream media. A little bit of coverage, but not too much. But you're covering it extensively in The Spectator.
Yeah, a COVID inquiry, a pretty soft inquiry, a COVID cover-up, I think Senator Malcolm Roberts called it today in The Spectator. But no, our leading article is from our editor-in-chief, Rogan, who quite rightly says that The Spectator alone was the only main publication that was actually criticising all the garbage that our premiers and health officials and the Prime Minister did to us during COVID. And basically everything that we said and we were mocked and ridiculed for saying has now been proven true. So if we had this whole era of misinformation, disinformation laws in now, back in COVID, we never would have got to the truth. They would have silenced the truth. And that is the lead article of Spectator today. You know, we should be allowed to speak the truth, and independent publications are essential. Absolutely essential to keeping our politicians honest.
And that's exactly why they don't want us around. That's exactly why they're bringing in the disinformation and misinformation bill, because they want to shut us down because we didn't do the right thing on The Voice and we didn't say all the right things on COVID. And it turns out that we were actually saying the right things on COVID, and all of the misinformation and disinformation was actually coming from the government. And that's not an exaggeration. That's actually now we can say 100% what happened because of that inquiry. We need a royal commission, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the problem is we are asking politicians to investigate themselves, which is always going to be an issue. But we do need to have a deeper dive into this because all the laws are still there. The abuses of power are still there. And what the main thing they came out with this COVID inquiry was, they're worried about a loss of trust and that we won't obey them the next time around. That is not the correct conclusion to draw from a COVID inquiry.
No, we won't obey them the next time around because and there is a loss of trust because there ought to have been. And they abused power enormously, and somebody needs to take responsibility for that. People suffered hugely. They couldn't get back to Australia. People with Australian passports couldn't come back home to their own country. People couldn't go and visit their dying relatives interstate, literally dying. They couldn't cross over, and yet football teams were. I mean, this was the most obscene, ridiculous period of misgovernment in Australia's history. And not only are we not punishing people for it, the CHO of Queensland, Jeanette Young, is now the governor of Queensland. We're putting up statues to Dan Andrews. We're giving awards out to these people who absolutely ran roughshod over our country, and they wonder why there's no stakeholder trust. Give me a break.
And
Anyway.
Damien, who's the Premier of Western Australia, Damien? The
Mr.
person in charge of the police force, right?
Yeah,
It's such a nightmare.
Well, now, yes, exactly. So, US election time. Again, speaking of deplorables who need to be shut up, who are usually right, it turns out to be right in the end. How do you think it's going to go? The polls are absolutely neck and neck. I looked at them this morning, just impossible to tell which way it's going to go. But Trump does have the momentum, right?
Well, who can predict the US election when you've got Donald Trump rocking up in a garbage truck to troll Joe Biden after he called Trump supporters garbage? I mean, this election is full of the theatre but also it's theatre that makes a political point. I mean, they said you've got to take Trump seriously, not literally, because he does make serious points with all of his theatrics. But as far as the election goes, I think if all things were equal and we could trust the integrity of a US election system, Donald Trump would be in the White House. But I am still concerned about what's going on in places like Michigan, where these voter rolls are a little bit dodgy, shall we say. And I have no guarantee that Kamala Harris and her team have reformed themselves when it comes to elections. So I don't know. I think if it was a fair election, Trump will be in the White House.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the other thing people need to realize about these stunts that Trump does versus the vacuous, meaningless theatrics of the other side is that when Trump does a stunt, he's making a point, right? He's using some theatre to get a real, valid and important point across, which is that these people are not garbage. Thank you very much. You haven't learned anything from the deplorables comment from Hillary Clinton in 2016, you fools. And we see it in Australian politics as well. People just putting people down on the right all the time as if they're morons and treating them like morons. Well, the morons are sick of being treated like that, if that's what we are, which we aren't. And we're going to come back and we're going to fight and we're going to say no to the so-called intelligent left and give them a kick where they need it. The other stunt, of course, was the McDonald's thing, and they put their foot right in it and said, "Oh, how terrible for a president to debase himself." And then we had that young girl come out and say, "Well, I work at McDonald's. What's wrong with my job? Why is it a base job? Why are you putting me down?" You know, she gets up every day, she goes to work.
Yeah, of course, the problem is that they've never liked the working class, the left wing. The Democrats don't like the middle class. They don't like people who go out there and make their own futures, who leave something to their family. That's why we're seeing the UK now with Keir Starmer's extraordinary inheritance taxes getting bigger. They want everything that you have earned, and they hate the idea that Trump is championing independence, families, people who want to make a better future for their kids. That's the opposite of what the left want, because if people are independent, have their own property, have their own lives, have their own businesses, well, guess what they don't need? They don't need the government to tell them what to do.
Exactly, and that's right. They don't like the working class. They just want to control and use the working class on the left. Alexandra Marshall at Ellie Melly on Twitter and Spectator Flat White. Thank you very much for joining us once again.
Thank you. Next time we'll have a party, Damien, because it'll be a Trump victory.
I hope so. We'll see you. Australia has at least one Conservative mainland Premier again, following the Liberal National Party's win in the Queensland state election. The coalition is one party in the Sunshine State, the LNP, and its leader, David Crisafulli, is the state's new Premier now. Here's how 7 News' Mark Riley reported it on Sunday.
An early start on day one for Queensland's new Premier.
We're off to work and we're underway.
The sounds of last night's victory still ringing in his ears. Winning a campaign fought on youth crime, and after 10 years of Labor, it's time.
Tonight, Queenslanders have voted for hope over fear.
7 News there. On election night, outgoing Labor Premier Stephen Miles, though, was not conceding defeat.
Watching the results tonight, it is clear that that hasn't been enough to secure a majority of seats for Labor, and also that the LNP is unlikely to have a majority.
Look, he's all smiles. But he was just hugely wrong. And he should have known better. Not only did the LNP win, they unexpectedly won with a big majority, 53 seats, likely to be the final outcome. There's 93 seats in Queensland Parliament. It's a good majority. Queensland's a unicameral parliament. What does that mean? It means it has no upper house, no legislative council, second chamber like the Senate federally or like most states have. The LNP got 42% of the primary vote. That's a pretty healthy number. But Labor was reduced to 32.6%. That means less than 1/3 of Queenslanders put the old left-wing party first. Labor had a 7% swing against it, and it will most likely finish with only 35 seats in the parliament. That's a massive loss of 18 seats. The Greens' vote sadly went up a little bit, 0.2% up overall to just under 10%, but not in the places where it counted. They lost one of their 2 seats, it looks like definitely almost, with South Brisbane unlikely to be retained. And they lost a big slice of the vote in their other seat, which is in a rich and NIMBY Green seat in the wealthy inner west of Brisbane. One Nation lost its only seat. There's one independent in Noosa. And Bob Katter's Katter Australian Party retained its 3 seats, but it didn't pick up any more, as was expected. The big news of the evening was that outgoing Labor Premier Stephen Miles' speech was undignified, delusional, and an unabashed pitch for the job of opposition leader moving forward. Here's how 9 News carried that.
Queenslanders know what I believe and what I stand for. While David Crisafulli ducked and weaved and tied himself into the tiniest small target Queensland has ever seen. Never before has a party taken to an election with so little detail of their agenda. This election finishes with many more questions about the LNP's plans than answers. I will never stop fighting for our Labor agenda. And I will never stop holding the LNP to account. Thank you all so much for your support.
Thank you.
That very shabby performance was slammed by almost everyone, including former Labor kingmaker and party elder and strategist Graham Richardson, who viciously ripped Miles' performance on the election night Sky News panel.
He ran a fantastic campaign, but then to give that speech I found it really odd, Richo.
It was as graceless as it was pathetic. I'm not going to defend that. That was a load of crap, and I'm very disappointed. I think you've got to show a lot more grace. You've got to be able to cop one on the chin. You've got to be able to lose well as win well in this game, because both of those things will happen to you.
Graham Richardson on the Sky News Australia Queensland State Election panel pulling no punches for Stephen Miles' benefit there. The LNP approached this Queensland election campaign with all the discipline of a corporate consulting team. Gantt charts, PowerPoints, and a clear focus on the big 3 issues: crime, cost of living and health. David Crisafulli was disciplined, focused, and he worked like a demon, and he deserves this win. He tackled the campaign with what can only be described as caffeinated zeal. Apart from his deputy, most of the rest of the team was kept away from the limelight. Probably a good idea, since their performance in opposition in terms of standing up for traditional Liberal Party values has been extremely average. All was under Crisafulli's tight and disciplined control until Robbie Katter, the son of Bob and the leader of the KAP, casually tossed a spark, shall we say, into the mix with his comments on abortion laws, handing the ALP an easy scare campaign to play with. The LNP's small target approach, running on an if we don't say too much, they can't pin much on us strategy, had left a gaping vacuum, as small target strategies do. And in politics, like nature, a vacuum will always be filled. Voters filled it with fears, worries, and whatever they heard on Talkback Radio. This was Robbie Katter on Sky before the election.
What I'm determined to do is put back in the Babies Born Alive bill, which is really just mimicking what is the practice code in Queensland Health right now, which is saying if a baby's planned abortion comes out breathing with a heartbeat, probably going to struggle for life, but that they can just give it some care and dignity. It's a human rights issue. It's not an abortion issue to me. That's what we've determined to put back in. We put it in the last parliament. That didn't even get support from Liberal and Labor in the committee system. I want to put that in first into the next parliament, and we'll see what happens.
Now, I had an obstetrics nurse explain to me what happens to babies that are born alive at about 15 weeks, and it's horrific. I can't even begin to explain because medical intervention isn't permitted. And what Robbie Katter is thinking about doing there is not that dramatic. It's not going to take away women's right to choose within a reasonable time frame. But on election night itself, Channel 7 Brisbane's new prime time news anchor, Sarah Greenhow, she spoke for all women, apparently, and men on this issue.
This has caused women a huge amount of fear and anxiety in this state. This is a very public platform. Would you like to apologise or show any remorse for what you've done? A huge amount of Robbie, there has been a spike. Robbie, there has been a spike in women calling health services, GPs, obstetricians, clinics up and down this state. I spoke to several of them yesterday.
You might find it surprising there's people have an alternate view to you, but I would argue there's babies in this equation as well. They need representation. Oh my God. You seem to deny that. That's fine.
Robbie, you're talking to a pregnant woman actually at the moment, so I'm well aware that there are babies involved.
We're allowed to have some beliefs that differ to yours and differ to other people. We've got the loosest abortion laws in the country. We're allowed to say, oh, we think you've gone too far. We're allowed to have an alternate view in this state, aren't we? You keep hounding me over it. I'm just saying I'm going to test the parliament. And that's what's going to happen.
I'm not hounding you. This is the first time we've had this discussion. But do you at least acknowledge that this is irresponsible, Robbie, to say, I'm going to test the parliament? This just causes women so much angst. There are only 4 countries in the world that have regressed on this issue. The United States, obviously very high profile. We've all seen what's happened there. Poland, Nicaragua in Central America, and El Salvador. Well, they have regressed, Robbie. They've gone backwards in time.
You use the word... Well, you keep gaslighting here. You use the word regressed. I think you love... fleshing out the debate and then pointing the finger at everyone and saying you can't have a different opinion to us.
Robbie, if I had my choice, we wouldn't be talking. We wouldn't be talking about going backwards.
She's not the sharpest knife, is she? She just didn't get it. He's saying that the very assumption in the question itself, that to adjust Queensland's very liberal abortion laws would mean we're going backwards or regressing, is not a view that everybody shares. Now, if you're sitting at home thinking, who's this bloke on television talking about abortion and what right does he have? I've spoken to a lot of conservative women about this and consulted on them before I wrote this as well. So these views are shared by different people. And was she trying to do some sort of gotcha with the I'm pregnant thing? I mean, it's lovely that you're pregnant. That's wonderful. Congratulations. But it's really got nothing to do with this story that you're supposed to be covering. So, despite what she and her friends in the inner cities might think, you can, in practical terms, get an abortion pretty much on demand up to about 26 weeks in Queensland. And there are lots of people in Australia, including lots of women, who think that that is just a little bit too liberal because they believe that the fetus at that point may be a human with its own rights. Now, some of them would say absolutely it is, or it's a human being at conception. I don't share that view, but there comes a point, right, where you've got to say, well, hang on, when does this become a person? And nobody can really, I don't believe, really answer that question. So there has to be compromise. And we're not going to reach a sensible compromise on this issue while people just keep shouting at each other and not listening to each other. And this type of pea-brained interviewing from B-grade old media anchors just isn't going to cut it. Anyway, let's quickly review some of the other issues that impacted this election. There were the 50-cent public transport fares. It was advertised as a ticket to equality, but for most it was a solution in search of a problem. Queensland's transport usage isn't exactly sky high, so far from equality, perhaps the ad should have read, funded by you, enjoyed by a few. And then there was Stephen Miles' free school lunches policy disaster that he was still spruiking even on election night in that terrible speech. Apparently, handing students government-sponsored sandwiches is the cure for Australia's diabetes crisis and kids' ADHD. One small step for school lunches, one giant leap for diabetes could have been that tagline. On the LNP side, the party couldn't escape the spectre of its past. They were haunted by the ghosts of former LNP Premier Campbell Newman's public service job cuts back in 2014-15 that the ALP's campaign capitalised on yet again 10 years after the fact. Why does this still linger? Because the LNP never bothered to confront it and set the record straight. The public service was bloated and it was sending us broke, and Newman was right to do what he did. And the current massive debt in Queensland proves that. Try saying that for once, LNP guys. Then there was the LNP leader himself, who managed to project more distaste than relatability. Charm and approachability are key ingredients in any campaign. And right up until probably around the last week, although he did well in the end, this was an election that a tired old government lost more than the LNP won. Crisafulli wasn't really able to muster much charm or approachability. I'm hoping he's going to do a lot better as Premier, because it is something he will need to fix if he's going to tackle the huge issues that face him as Premier. Spiralling debt, a bloated public service, and angry, way too powerful unions. Thirdly, if there's one thing Australians love in their elections, it's a good hearty bit of political mudslinging and humour. The LNP left their negative campaign tools somewhere in the back room. Instead of sinking their teeth into the ALP's 10-year track record with well-placed jabs, they opted to play nice. This wasn't a chess match, it was Queensland politics, and the LNP missed the chance to turn the ALP's track record into a case study of what not to do in government. And finally, yet most importantly for how they might govern in the future, the LNP also seemed to lose touch with the very principles that their traditional supporters value. Fiscal responsibility, small government, private enterprise. Small government, small business. Business-minded Queenslanders found themselves scratching their heads, wondering if they'd missed a major memo. With the LNP seemingly adrift, many long-time supporters felt that they'd lost a compass, leading some to sit this election out or cast their vote elsewhere. And that is all for this week on The Other Side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. Please remember to tell your friends about the show. That's one of the best things you can do to help support us. Follow us on X and YouTube. Smash every button you possibly can. We're now back on TikTok too. And do watch out for our new shorts on YouTube also. Please smash the like, subscribe, and every other button on all the platforms that you can. We drop a new show every Friday night at 7 o'clock. If you're watching on YouTube, to make sure that you never miss any of our content, hit that subscribe button below and hit the little bell. The little bell will notify you when we post new content. That's very important, and that's all free. Now, if you like what we're doing, you want to support us, we do need your help, please jump onto our new website at othersidetv.com.au and sign up to the exclusive side, because for as little as $5 a month, you can really support us a lot. Or just sign up for free so we can keep in touch. I'm Damien Khoury. We'll catch you next week.